Welcome along to episode 3 of the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail. The jump season is shaping up nicely on the trail towards the Cheltenham Festival. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and joined every week, as always, by Matt Toombs and Donn McClean. And Donn, it's that time of year. It's almost the calm before the storm, but there are some decent clashes we have this year that we've been probably starved of in previous jump seasons, to be fair.
Yeah, no, it's great. Dan, the season running along now with Jonbon against Energamine on Saturday, which is brilliant that clash happened. And we'll discuss that in more depth now. Maybe it wasn't quite the Energamine Shishkin clash of a couple of years ago, but it was still good that they both got there and both seemed like they ran their races. We've got the Dublin Racing Festival now in a week and a half's time. So that's going to be phenomenal, I'd say. The build up to that's going to be really interesting. But yeah, as you said, some good racing as well this weekend before then. So yeah, no, it's been a really good season so far.
Yeah, Matt, I mentioned we were starved of these clashes. You know, Willie having a lot of the top horses, not his fault, but trying to separate them. But he's got so many horses now, he has to send Lossiemouth over to take on Constitution Hill. And at the time of recording, that looks like that will happen on Saturday, as far as I can see, unless I'm missing something.
I echo what Donn said. It's been fantastic, these clashes, Lossiemouth, Ballyburn and Ergamine. And even though Willie's been getting the wrong end of it, he's still bringing them over, which has really lit up the winter. You know, I come from an era where everything wasn't so spring focused, and the big clashes did happen over the winter much more often. And so you do feel starved of it. And it's been great this season. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned at the start, Don, we needed Lossiemouth to beat Constitution Hill because we just presumed then it would separate them. But it's great to see that will probably happen on Saturday, you know?
Yeah, no, it looks like that's what's going to happen. It was little bit of a left field swing from Nicky Henderson to say that Constitution Hill was going to go there. Willie had already kind of intimated that Lossiemouth might go back there, which made sense. She won the race last year. And yeah, look, Constitution Hill, he'll probably come forward for his Christmas hurdle win. But Lossiemouth, we know that she wasn't at her best that day. She didn't do anything. She didn't travel. She didn't jump as well as she can. And yeah, if Willie decides that he wants to have another go, that'd be brilliant.
And we'll get to the races now, but the champion hurdle picture, there's still other dark horses that will run in the DRF, which we'll talk about. But even Stateman, if he recovers and it's just a one-off at Christmas, who knows? So fascinating division all of a sudden. It's great, isn't it? You can't wait. It's just rare, which is fantastic. But it does feel this jump season is picking up a bit. There are more clashes. I'm very much looking forward to it. So if you're new to the show here, we're going to review all the weekends racing as much as we can, or races we haven't spoken about, and the guys will share that very popular 3 eye catchers each or in and around every single week. And before we get going, if you are new as well, just hit that like button wherever you're watching or listening. It's much appreciated and helps our content get out to a wider audience. And do check out the Matchbook Horse Racing podcast Matt was on last week, and the guys will be there on Friday to preview Lossiemouth versus Constitution Hill. Tom Stanley Lane, Constitution Hill, no doubt, and he might just get his way this time. Who knows? Let's start with the Clarence House. Matt, hit us with the trend and your thoughts on the race, because we mentioned these clashes. It all kicked off with an Energamine Shishkin a couple of years ago, and even though Energamine lost that race, you think the long-term benefits were for Energamine, given he won 2 champion chases afterwards. So talk us through the trends of this race, probably, you know, since then, and what it means for those horses that maybe win or lose this race but go on to the champion chase.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Daniel, because since this became a Grade 1 in 2008, runners 9 from 40 won the champion chase, but 4 of those 9 winners, including Energamine twice, were beaten in the Clarence House. So just because you were beaten here, don't give up your tickets for the champion chase if you backed him. Jonbon was a bit gassy, made all, jumped well. One small visual clue, he's looking better to my eye when he's on the wrong stride. When he's not fluent, he's generally landing with a bit more momentum. So that's a positive. Won again in good style. Nicky said they'll keep making it unless someone wants to go throat cutter, in which case Jonbon could sit in. Vibes are this him's a strong staying 2-miler whose jumping can now be relied on. They want to run the finish out of the others in the champion chase. We know he stays a sharp 2-4 from the Melling chase. So those tactics looks right. It goes on any ground, hugely likeable. But there are 2 things against him from a champion chase betting point of view. I think he's exposed as a low 170s horse, a very consistent one. I don't think he had to improve to do what he did on Saturday. And that could well be good enough to win this year's race. But if there is an opponent who produces a top-notch performance, he looks beatable. And the second is well publicised. Record at Cheltenham is less good than elsewhere. 2 from 5 at Cheltenham, 16 from 16 elsewhere. So the big question is, how much less good is he at Cheltenham? Yeah, it was Constitution Hill he was taking on in a fast run supreme that spread him out. But 22 lengths, still a long way to be beaten, never going to land a blow on El Fabiolo in the Arkle, only 6.5 lengths ahead of Sanois there. His 3 runs at Prestbury Park since have been his least good 3 runs in open company. So they're the bare stats. Can you make excuses? 2 of those 3 were on seasonal debut and are slower. Nickies often need the run more than most. So whilst Jonbon's 5 from 5 on seasonal debut, maybe it was more that than the track. The other run, Nico wasn't riding, he didn't jump well. My hunch is that the logical answer is true. He is about £5 or so less good at Cheltenham, in which case he's a vulnerable short price favourite around 2.38. But I wouldn't be sure of that. I wouldn't be sure he wouldn't produce his best at Cheltenham at this stage of his career. And he could be the sort of Cider Grouge type favourite who everyone wants to knock and drifts out to a silly price on the day on current form. It'd be a fascinating part of the debate on the run up to the Champion Chase. Energumene, he's 11, comeback trail from a hind leg injury. The Hiddyway form where he looked set to finish alongside Banbridge, who's better over further, conceding £10, looked to give him a lot to find here. So it proved. He looked 160 horse at best at Cork. And Willie said he was very fit there. So for me, he rather holds down rather than bolsters the form. Clear-cut second, he was 4 lengths ahead of Edwardstone, who looked to be ridden for prize money. Nergumene's a bit keen here, so maybe if he settled better, it'd help in the Champion Chase, but equally has to go back left-handed, which won't be ideal. It's much more likely that 11, and having had a significant injury, is just not the horse he was. And I think connections are suggesting they're going to try and avoid a sound surface going forward. So in some ways, this was the perfect result. Jonbon looks really good, solid favourite for the Champion Chase. If he wins, you'd say absolutely deserves it, but he's not one that should frighten the opposition off. So we should get a cracking race in March.
Okay, weapon the appetite for the Champion Chase, the featured race on Wednesday. Don, give it to us from Energumene's point of view. Did he run, because we didn't get your thoughts before the race and how the race would go, did he run as you expected, decent second behind Jonbon, but never likely to win, or did you expect maybe a tad more?
Yeah, I thought he might, get a wee bit closer to him, Dan, but from early on in the race, it was apparent that Jonbon, he just did everything right. I was impressed with him. I thought he was very good, Jonbon, and I agree with an awful lot of what Matt said. Like, going into the race, even though Jonbon is 2 years younger than Energumene, he'd had more running. And the record over fences was identical. They both won 11 of 13 races over fences before going into Saturday's race. Energumene had that run in the Hiddyway Chase where he won, albeit he might have been challenged by Banbridge if Banbridge hadn't departed at the final fence, and Banbridge then obviously upheld the form over obviously a much longer trip in the King George. But I thought Energumene would come forward from that and might give Jonbon a wee bit more of a race than he did. But Jonbon's his record at Cheltenham, it's really interesting, and as Matt was saying, you can point to other reasons why maybe he underperforms at Cheltenham, but he's underperformed at Cheltenham now 3 times. His only 3 defeats have been at Cheltenham, and going back there, you have to think it's obviously not a positive for him. That said, he's never been out of the first 2 in all his life. He's never been out of the first 2. He's such a consistent horse. He's probably because he's been beaten 3 times at Cheltenham. He's probably a horse that didn't get the love that he should have been getting. But I think that's coming now. I think now people are kind of that's the patter about Jonbon, that he kind of deserves to go win a Champion Chase now, and you can obviously see it happening. We're waiting for something to come along and challenge him at the top. Gaelic Warrior could do that. He's going to, all going well, go on the Dublin Chase at the Dublin Racing Festival. Marine Nationale would probably take him on there. Marine Nationale, of course, the Supreme Novice third winner from a few years ago. He's got the potential to step up and be as good over fences as he proved that he was over hurdles. But Energumene in the Champion Chase, like his 2 Champion Chase wins, they've both been on soft ground. He's 11 now. Moscow Flyer is the last 11-year-old to win a Champion Chase. That was in 2005, and Moscow Flyer was an outstanding 2-mile chaser. Before Moscow Flyer, you go back to Skymass back in 76 and 77 when he won as an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. But yeah, look, it's a bar. The ground comes up very, very soft at Cheltenham. It's hard to see Energumene going and winning a Champion Chase. But Jonbon, he's a worthy favourite. He sets the standard. He that's the standard to which the others might need to get to. But I agree with Matt. I think the fact that he's probably not as good at Cheltenham as he is, let's say, at Sandown or at Aintree or at Ascot, that makes him a favourite that definitely in the next few weeks I'll be looking to take on.
Okay, yeah. Fascinating. Both guys ultimately thinking he's not a Cheltenham horse. Who knows? Again, it'll be a popular discussion point. And Energamy maybe at his age, perhaps up and trip or soft ground being essential to him there. Let's move on to the Kinloch Bray, which was won by Appreciate It. Matt, give us your trend and we'll let Donn come in on this race.
Trend is that runners have finished 2-2-6-1F in the champion chase. Third is a sharp track, often provides decent ground even in the middle of winter. So it's not just a race for stayers.
Yeah, Donn, your thoughts on the race?
Yeah, interesting race. Maybe didn't pan out the way most people expected, even though Willie Mullins had the 1-2-3. Appreciate it. It was good to see him back. He's 11 years old now as well, just turned 11. He hadn't won since he won the Novice Chase at Naas back in January 2 years ago. So it was good to see him back. Classic Getaway ran well for a long way. Blood Destiny, maybe on the face of it, was a bit disappointing that he couldn't go and pick up a stable companion, given that he travelled into his race along the inside and looked like he was coming there with a winning chance. I suppose in mitigation, it was his first run of the season. He's there's 2 miles 5 furlong even on good ground stretch him. I think it probably does. While he ran over 2.5 miles last season as a novice, his best run was when he beat Spillan's Tower in the Flying Bull chase over 2 miles. And yeah, it might be that a drop back down and trip to 2 miles or thereabouts could be a positive for Blood Destiny. But I thought it was great that Appreciated could go and win the race like he did. Like this, the Kinloch Bray chase or the Horse and Jockey Hotel chase as it is now, it's been a really good pointer, as Matt was saying, to staying races in the past. Don Cossack won it. He went on and won the Gold Cup. Size and John won it, beat Sub Lieutenant in a really tough race. And before that, Size and John was seen as a 2.5 miler. But then after that, because he probably outstayed Sub Lieutenant on the day, Jessica Harrington stepped him up to 3 miles for the Irish Gold Cup. And then we know how all that season ended. Allaho used to win the Kinloch Bray regularly before going on and winning the Ryanair chase. So it is a very good race with an eye on the future. And as Matt was saying, Thurles, even in January, it can provide goodish ground as it did on Saturday. So or on Sunday. So yeah, look, it's a race always worth watching with an eye on the future. But for me, Blood Destiny is the horse to take out of it, and maybe with improvement coming for dropping back down and trip.
Yeah, Matt, for you, give us your thoughts on those top three in the bet, and then did that ultimately finish all Willie Mullins? But I guess it maybe wasn't the way people thought it would end up, at least according to the betting market before the race.
Yeah, so I completely echo what Don said, specifically about Blood Destiny. I thought for a while he's a 2 miler, and not even a strong staying 2 miler like Jonbon, but a speedy 2 miler. Nothing happened here to change that view. Jumped well, landed running, travelled into the race, looked blatant non-stayer. He wasn't helped by Danny Mullins on Classic Getaway, shrewdly getting the pair racing a long way out, so it didn't turn into a sprint. Danny won the battle, but not the war, as Appreciate It stayed on to beat them both. Paul said afterwards, Blood Destiny a bit keen and just got tired on the belated seasonal debut. That makes sense, but he's crying out for a drop back to 2 miles. There aren't many options in Ireland. Only 2 weeks until the Dublin chase, DRF. May have had a hard race over a trip. He doesn't look to get on the seasonal debut here, so that may not be the right call. The other domestic options, the Newlands chase at Naas on the 23rd of February, which is 2.5 weeks before the champion chase. Game Spirit's in between on the 8th of February if Willie wanted to travel. So he's an interesting outsider for the champion chase. Let's hope Willie can work his magic and get in there rather than keep targeting intermediate trips. Classic Getaway may have paid the price for being ridden to beat the favourite here. Remains something of an enigma. I think this is his trip, but he's not been easy to keep right. Finishing effort wasn't that strong here. Looking like maybe he won't fulfil his potential for all he remains a smart horse. And Appreciate It didn't jump as well as the other pair. Not fluent at a few, dragged his hind legs through 3 out, brushed through the last. Maybe he was flattered by being up against a non-stayer and a weak finisher who took each other on a fair way out. But he certainly finished well. He did have the theoretical advantage of 2 runs under his belt, compared to 1 for Classic Getaway and none for Blood Destiny. But that said, he's looked to go well fresh in the past. Best performance last year was when half a length second to faster slower than John Durkin. So bit of a head scratcher. My hunch is that everything just fell right for Appreciate It here. And now 11, he retains enough ability to take advantage at grade 2 level when that happens. He's not entered at Cheltenham. Makes sense to target races like the Webster Cup at Navan on the 2nd of March. So from a Cheltenham perspective, the only clue I took from this is that if there is a plausible Grade 1 winner at the festival, it's Blood Destiny, but it needs to be in the Champion Chase, not the Ryanair.
Okay, still not holding or giving up hope with Blood Destiny as a out and out 2-miler. Don, back to you for the floor. The Lees Chase and Protectorate. Great to see him back to his best. What does that mean going forward? And like going into the race, like 4.33 shot. I guess people weren't quite expecting that performance or him to respond. And I guess with certain conditions, like it was over the weekend, he is a lively player if it comes to something like the Ryanair again next year.
Yeah, soft ground left-handed, Dan. That's it for Protectorate. Yeah, fully agree with that. It was great to see him back, and he was very good. And Jello was in trouble from a little way out. He reversed placements from their Peterborough chase with Jello going the other way around, going left-handed as opposed to right-handed. But look, in hindsight, this is all very easy. He had £5 in hand on official ratings. He was back going the right way, and he had his favourite soft ground. So looking back, it wasn't wholly unexpected that Protectorate will put up a performance like this. But no, he was very good, and he had the race in the bag from a long way out. You just have to love Protectorate. He's the Ryanair chase winner from last season. That's where he's going to go next. I think the race was run in a finishing speed percentage of 97% for the winner. The runner-up had a finishing speed percentage of 90%. So it shows you that it was a really well-run race. Harry Skelton was intent, obviously, on making it a test at the trip, and Protectorate sees out this trip well. I suppose on the negative, the last 10-year-old winner of a Ryanair was Alberta's Run back in 2011. Now that said, the first 7 renewals of the Ryanair chase, three of the winners were 10-year-olds. So it was a race in which older horses did well, and it hasn't been of late. But Protectorate, yeah, look, he's great to see him back, and he has to be at least in the Ryanair chase picture.
Yeah, in the Ryanair chase picture, Matt, but I think the problem, and it's stating the obvious here, it just seems such a deeper race this year than previous years. Is that always the case at this time of year? I have a feeling it's not, and it's just always this is more than usual. But I think both are true. I think it always seems a tougher race than it ends up being come March.
I think you're right, Daniel. I think it always looks it with all the possible runners at this stage, but I think it's possible more of them will turn up this year. So I agree. I think he's definitely a contender because he's a class horse. But 11.0 wouldn't attract me. It was very much a case of different day, different track, wasn't it? He hated going right-handed, and J-Lo gave a jumping exhibition in the Peterborough. Here, on a sharp left-handed track, he loved it, and J-Lo never looked comfortable going out to his right. It's early days at this new Windsor track. It's quite different from the figure of 8 some of us remember. My initial hunch, and it's no more than that, is that it could prove a real specialist track. It's very sharp. Some of the bends look tricky. So whilst the fences themselves look quite small and soft, some may be trappy. We'll come to an example of that later on. And given there are a lot of big pots here, and it's designed to provide a big seasonal target for winter ground horses, especially as at Christmas, the big British races are focused around Kempton, which often provides a sound surface. That could be important to remember for the meeting next year. It may be the sort of meeting where the same horses keep winning, loving this unusual track, having not performed elsewhere, so go off inflated prices, time will tell. So with J-Lo, I didn't get too excited by his Peterborough win. I wouldn't get too downhearted by this. He looked to hate the track, put a line through it. Maybe best going right-handed. He did jump a bit to his right in the turners, but nothing like as much. So I want to see him show a level of form left-handed before considering him for the Ryanair. A couple of good horses, but I suspect, as you hinted, Daniel, that 1 or 2 of the real gun, probably second season chasers are going to turn up in the Ryanair, and I think they'll have too much for this pair.
Okay, we will move on to Thurles here and stick with you, Matt, as you can give us a trend here as well. We had a couple of non-runners due to the ground, but Nara was the winner of the Mares Novice Chase.
Yes, the trend is that winners have finished 1-2-7 in the 4 renewals of the Mares Chase. Winner was Colreevy en route to winning the inaugural Mares Chase. This looked a cracking race beforehand. As you said, 2 market leaders, Odie by Night and Spindlebury, came out, which left 5. Still an interesting contest. And at the start of the season, Nara had been on my list of novice mares who might make up into a contender for the Mares Chase at the festival. 2 of the 4 winners so far been novices. And as it's worked out, lots of the established mares don't look in the same form this year. But she's had jumping issues, fell on debut. Then after winning at Goran, her jumping led her down at Cork behind Only by Night in the Grade 2 over 2 miles, the Impervious one en route to winning the Mares' Chase 2 seasons ago. She did jump better here, but there's still room for improvement in her jumping. Hesitant the second, made a bit of a mistake, 5 out, in tight 2 out. The bare form of beating 123 rated Broomfield Bijou 2¼ lengths and receipt of £6 isn't good enough to be a Mares' Chase contender, but she looks to have more ability than that. So I wonder what Henry will do now. She's rated 123 over hurdles in Ireland, £12 lower than a New Irish Chase mark, having been 7th in the Fred Winter, and we know how strong last season's juvenile form is. Be interesting to see whether they consider switching back to the smaller obstacles. Henry's horses have been quiet during January, 2 from 37, so that's another angle for improvement as we get to March. We know Henry's a master at picking his horses for Cheltenham. So she's dropped off my list for the Mares' Chase a bit, but I think Donn might be keener on her, so I'll let him make the case.
Yeah, make the case, Donn.
Yeah, look, she's a mare that I quite like, Dan. Like her last year as a herder, as Matt said, she finished 7th in the Fred Winter, which was a good run for such an inexperienced horse. And while she fell on her chasing debut at Sligo, she had jumped well up to that point, and her jumping was very good then at Gorham Park the last day. At Cork, in the race that Only by Night won, that Matt alluded to, her jumping was not good. I was surprised at how kind of lacking in fluency it was, given that she jumped so well on her first 2 runs. So like Matt, I had her in mind as a mare who could go on to really good things over fences. She's now rated lower over fences, or sorry, over hurdles and over fences. I think she's 135 over fences. But this was a good performance, I thought. It is a pity that the 2 non-runners Only by Night and Spindleberry came out. But even before that, I was thinking Nara was an interesting mare, even against those 2 on the ground. I suppose it wasn't hugely surprising that they were taken out on the ground, and looking forward to seeing Only by Night again wherever she goes. She could go to the Scilly Isles Chase now. I was just reading there the other day. But Nara, she battled on well to beat Broomfield Bijou. And I think Broomfield Bijou, as Matt said, she's got a rating of 123. I think she's better than that, and she's an interesting horse. I think she's up to 129 now, but she's a mare who could 2.5 miles goodish ground. That suits her well. And Philip Dempsey, her trainer's horses, have been in really good form of late. So keep an eye on Broomfield Bijou wherever she goes. There could be a handicap in her with those types of conditions in her favour. But Nara, I think she can go on from this. I think given that she has been jumping well in her first 2 races, even though she fell in the first of them. Again, if she can get back to that level of fluency over her fences, that could see her take a nice step forward. She's only 5. She's very inexperienced, but she's getting there. And yeah, like 135 of a rating over fences, I think that's reasonable. She's only had those 4 runs over fences now. I think she can continue to improve, and if she can get back to that fluency that she was showing in the early part of her chasing year, then that could bring her forward again. And this goodish ground suits her well. She seems to maybe jump better off goodish ground than off softer ground. And yeah, I think that she's a mare from him that could be worth to come now.
Okay, split opinion perhaps on Nara there, and watch out for the non-runner Only by Night wherever she goes. Matt will go back in time to Friday and go to a fascinating race here, and even on the Matchbook Betting Exchange at Gidley Park, nobody wanted to back him, but he made all from the front, and I thought it was just a really solid performance, albeit Caldwell Potter was very disappointing in second, just given connections, etc.
Yeah. This is a race that's moved from Ascot to Doncaster to Lingfield, now at Windsor. None of the previous venues have led it to being a good Arkle trial. The 13 winners to run the Arkle this century, only Shishkin did the double, 11 of the other 12 unplaced. It's often been a weak grade 2. I suspect it was again in terms of being an Arkle trial, but as you alluded, Daniel, featured some interesting horses, particularly Gidley Park, who was a good novice hurdler last season. Form when edging out Lucky Place in the Classic on Trials Day. Looks good now, the runner-up having won the Ascot and Relkeel hurdles this season. I'd always forgive a novice not taking to the test in the Albert Bartlett. He started this season one of Britain's leading novice chase prospects, pulled up with an irregular heartbeat on chasing debut in November. But that is a condition some horses bounce back very quickly from. Captain Guinness suffered it at Leopardstown at Christmas last season, won the champion chase less than 3 months later. So Gidley Park used his stamina here, making pretty much all, never really under threat at the business end. This was effectively his first chase start. It's a bit novice-y, going through the top of his fences. As mentioned, these new fences at Windsor look pretty small, even by modern British standards. So for all they look a bit trappy, he has to prove he can jump stiffer obstacles. Harry Fried non-committal afterwards, about targets. albeit he did say Gidley Park prefer a more galloping track. I doubt he's an Arkle horse, and given the way his season has gone, I'd be surprised if Harry wants to aim him at the Broadway. Be interesting to see what, if any, entries he gets this afternoon. With the 4-length runner-up rated 148, he might have blown his handicap mark now, going up £11 to 149. The ground was pretty soft, and that should have suited Caldwell Potter for all he might want it heavy. But having jumped and travelled again, he didn't find much. It's early days. I judge him maybe after another run, but I doubt he's going to be a Grade 1 horse this season at least. And this is the sort of ideal race to use as a stepping stone to the 2.5 mile novices handicap chase at the festival. Personal Ambition's trained by one of the best target trainers for the festival, Ben Pauling, who's 4 from 59 the festival. You made a 15% profit backing his runners blind. And at the last 3 festivals, Ben's won the Plate and Grand Annual. And off 137, Personal Ambition's won for the long list for the novice handicap chase or the Plate. He's qualified for the open handicap chases now after 4 starts. And finally, You Wear It Well. I mean, perhaps she's a plot for the novice handicap chase too, but she looks out of sorts at the moment. I want to see a return to form before considering her.
Yeah, Don, maybe start with the runner-up. It was amazing how quickly the conversation shifted to this horse now being potentially a Grand Annual horse or something like that, a non-Grade 1 horse off the back of that performance. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he needs really, really soft ground, Dan. When he won the Grade 1 hurdle at Leopardstown over Christmas last season, and he was Gordon Elliott, like that was such a performance that he and Predator's Goal came clear. Okay, look, down memory lane did disappoint in that, but he was so good, and he just grounded out the ground at Windsor on Saturday, or on Friday and Sunday. It's soft. I'd say it looked soft, no softer than that, and maybe he just needs it softer because he's obviously a talented horse, but I think his talent is dependent on the ground being really deep. Like, look, he's a really well-bred horse, as we know. He's a brother to Mighty Potter, half brother to French Dynamite and Indiana Jones. He's got his price tag, and therefore he's always going to be high profile, and there's always going to be a high level of expectation about him. But I thought he ran okay. He was sent off an odds-on shot again. I think those days are now probably over. That high level of expectation, maybe it's going to be diluted now on the back of his last 2 runs. So, but on very, very soft ground, if we do get it again, I'd definitely keep him in mind, if not on side. Gidley Park, yeah, he was sent off the outsider of the 4 runners, which was kind of surprising in hindsight, but he was very, very good. As Matt said, he was a really good hurdler last season, progressing now over fences, so it's going to be really interesting to see how he goes. And Personal Ambition, as Matt mentioned, yeah, he's the horse for me to take out of the race. Thought he ran well, but he's a better horse over 2.5 miles. He probably would have won the Grade 2 race at Ascot just before Christmas when he made a bad mistake at the final fence. So he's a horse to keep in mind now when he goes back up and trip up to 2.5 miles. And You Wear It Well, yeah, it's just not the mare that she was or that she threatened to be. So the jury's out on her. But Personal Ambition, definitely a horse to keep in mind going forward.
Okay, keep an eye on most of the horses really in that race by the sounds of things. And we'll get to Matt's trends on the Hampton Novices Chase in a second, basically indicating it's more Turner's race than the Broadway race back, obviously, with Turner's not being there this year. Give us your thoughts on the race, Don.
Yeah, it was a slowly run race, Dan. Finishing speed percentage of 111%, which wasn't surprising really with just 3 runners. Larry's Bar, he made that mistake at the 3rd last. I think Jingo Blue was probably coming to get him at the time anyway. We don't know, and it was a significant mistake that Larry's Bar made, and he was still travelling well at the time. But Jingo Blue, he's now won his 2 chases. He was impressive when he talks to her on his chase debut. He's got a hurdles mark of 140. I think Nicky Henderson said he's going to go to the Reynolstown Chase next. I think that was the plan, and because the Hampton Chase was rerouted to Windsor, they took it in, given that there were two opponents in the race, which made sense, but onto the Reynolstown next, and then onto the Brown Advisory Chase. I was thinking before this that he was probably a 2.5 miler, fell into the same category as Ampere Pass, who didn't have a Turner's Chase to run up this year, but up to 3 miles now, he's proven that he stayed it, albeit in a fairly slowly run race. And he was pulled up in behind Ballyburn in the Bear and Bingham hurdle last season at Cheltenham. But it was a nice performance. He proved that he stayed 3 miles. he'd probably face a deeper level of competition if he does go to the Reynolds-Town and then on to the Brown Advisory Chase. But I don't think it could have been. You could have expected much more from Jinko Blue than the performance that he put up.
Okay, your thoughts on the winner, Matt?
Yeah, I liked him. As Donn said, he started off looking at 2.5 miler, but given the chance, a 3 mile sharp track, and as Donn said, it was a slowly run race. But he stayed that well, and he visually he looks like he'll stay, but you couldn't draw a firm conclusion from this. The Hampton Novice Chase, it was first run 2004, usually at Warwick. Runners are 0 from 8 in the Broadway, but were 2 from 2 in the Old Turners. So another indication that at novice level, at least, the top novices tend to be more flexible as to trip than they're often given credit for. I'd echo what Donn said about the 2 main protagonists. Wanted to make a point about the course here. It's early days, but back in the day, the jumps track was figure of 8, like the chase track at Fontwell. They've opted for an oval, but albeit one where it's kind of squashed together in the middle, still a bit like an 8 in shape, but where they don't cross over in the middle. And that's left some bends looking very sharp and an unusual chase track in terms of there being 3 fences near the end. The time for this was 6 minutes 27. The third last was jumped about 36 seconds before the winner crossed the finishing line. By way of context, in the Broadway last season, the third last was jumped nearly a minute before the winner crossed the line. So there's a lot of jumping at the end. And as Donn said, that third last was crucial with Lowry's bar making a mistake, having jumped so well, better than the winner. It comes up very quickly off the bend. So it was going right-handed there because although it's a left-handed track, that sort of squash section means that you have a sort of right-handed round a gentle bend and then that fence comes up quickly. It looks a bit trappy. So I wouldn't hold that against Lowry's bar. He's interesting again, I think, potentially for a handicap. It's his 4th run over fences, rating of 144, half brother to Getaway Goldie, who showed his best form for Gordon Elliott over 3 miles. He looked to stay this trip well, albeit sharp track and slowly run race. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's one for the Ultima. But Jinko Blue definitely go on to the Reynolds-Town, needs a bit more experience, I think, to brush up his jumping. And it wouldn't surprise me if he made up into a contender for the Broadway.
Okay, yeah, it is a bit weird visually as well when you're watching races when they sort of the old, when you're comparing it with the old track versus what they've done there. And Matt's maybe forgiving Larry's bar off the back of that. Now let's move on to a talking race here. It is the 2 miles 4 furlongs conditions hurdles race that took place at Windsor on Friday. And Donn, it's not often the talking horse out of a race like this of 5 in a conditions race like this is the horse that finished last. I mean, is he just a spring horse? What does a spring horse mean, as some people were saying on Twitter over the weekend?
Yeah, well, look, the handicapper didn't drop him for his run the last day at Cheltenham on New Year's Day. He was dropping by £2 to mark 158 after 160. I know you're chairman of the Lager Dan fan club, Dan. But yeah, look, he's finished 5th again. Spring horse for whatever reason. That's where he seems to come into his own, but he's only down to 158. So as we were discussing the last time he ran, it might be that they just have to go to the Stayers herd, and that's just the way it is. But I thought it was an interesting race otherwise. And Namian Line did well to win. He was actually much higher in the market when betting opened than he ended up. He was sent off favourite in the end. I think he was 4th or 15 when betting opened, but he did well. He battled on well. But the horse to take out of the race for me is Salver. I thought his run in the Relkiel hurdle was a really good run. He fell at the final flight that day, but he was in behind in a slowly run race, and of course we don't know how he would have fared. And it may be that he wouldn't have beaten Lucky Place, but I think he would have ended up finishing well and running him close. He was £7 poorly in with Namian Line on ratings going into this race. He finished close up second. He was up handy for most of the journey, which was an advantage in a race that wasn't that quickly run. But he kept on well after he was passed. He finished 3rd in the Triumph Hurdle last year, remember, in front of Nürburgring and Salvatore Mundi. That was Matt was saying earlier on, the juveniles last season, and the Triumph Hurdle in particular. It's a strong group of juveniles, and he's coming on from that. He finished 4th in the Jerry Fielding as well. So he's on a mark of 143 now. I think he could be a well-handicapped horse on that type of mark. He stays 2.5 miles an hour. We know that. He won the finale hurdle at Chepstow in December last year, so he's got that back class as well. And maybe something like the Coral Cup could be an interesting race for him. But wherever he goes now, I think 2.5 miles, and soft ground seems to be important to him. So 2.5 miles soft ground, or at least the easy ground. I think he's a horse to keep in mind.
Okay, and yeah, same-ish question to you, Matt, I guess. I mean, I backed Langerdan off the back of this race, which is an outrageous thing to say in public, but I'm very impressed with his Aintree performance last year and 3 miles Cheltenham Hill. There could even be more improvement versus maybe the Coral Cup of 2.5. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, of all the surprises that happened the weekend, your backing Langerdan's probably not the biggest of them.
101.
Yeah, they're trying desperately to get him down a bit, aren't they? Arctic Fire did win the county off 158, the mark that Langerdan's now got. That's the highest mark defied this century. Wouldn't be surprised if they try and get a run or two in, get him down a pound or two. But as has been said, it might have to be the stayers for him this year. It'd be very interesting to see, because you can almost put a line through the form that he's had so far this season. Nemean Lion, I was quite impressed with that. I thought this was quite a decent race. And maybe he's an outsider for the stayers if they decide to go that route. 67.0 looks a bit big given the record of horses like Nichols Canyon, Soul Whip, more of that, English Dreaver. It's stepping up from short and intermediate graded races into the stayers. He's never run beyond 2.5, but he was second in a 1 mile 7 Group 2 on the flat as a 3-year-old. So now 8, perhaps 3 miles, just what he wants. Might be that's not the route he goes down. Wouldn't surprise me to see him go to the Kingwell and Aintree hurdles again, maybe even bypassing Cheltenham, because he does seem very well suited by flat track. Hopefully Kerry Lee will take the bold route and give him a chance. He need to improve thick end of a stone to win, but I can't see him winning a grade 1 at 2 or 2.5, so it'd be worth giving it a go. Like Donn, Salver I think is interesting, up to 148, £5 for this. So the Coral Cup looks exactly the sort of race if he were to get genuinely soft ground. I just wonder the fact that they've been running him in these conditions races and running him against higher rated horses, and he's been running to almost win the races, whether they've got races more like the National Spirit at Fontwell in mind. If you were going to run a horse to hide the handicap mark in these conditions races, you wouldn't want to be getting so close to winning against higher rated horses. But I like him. Blue King Daru threw his chance away by hanging and jumping badly, left the business end. Again, going back to this very sharp track, perhaps he just couldn't cope with that. So if his antics were a one-off, I'd forgive him that, and he's best judged after another run.
Okay, and maybe forgive a couple of those horses. Like you said, the track, even visually, just looked a tad weird, or just tad not normal versus other tracks. Let's move on to the Warfield Mares Hurdle, Matt, and hit us with your trends and your thoughts for the race. Cargizi, I mean, everyone was excited given how hot that last year's Triumph has worked out. Ultimately, a disappointing run here, I would say, although it's early days in her season.
I agree with both those points. Bit disappointing, but early days. There are no trends here because this is now a 2 mile race. It was a 3 mile race up until this year. Vroom Vroom Mag did the double of this in the Mares Hurdle. The patterns change, so this effectively swaps with the Yorkshire Rose this coming weekend, the distance of which has gone up from 2 miles to 3 miles. It was all about Cargizi and how she settled, and she didn't. Got warm in the paddock, keen to post, 2-3 in the race, going down by 3/4 of a length to take no chances. A long way short of what would be needed to win a Mares Hurdle, even without Brighter Days Ahead and Lossiemouth in it, and miles away from what would be needed if either turned up and ran their race. She's apparently quite burly in the ring, so she come on for it. But even though she was keen, she wasn't absolutely pulling a train. Like you, I was a shade disappointed. The new Mullins method of leaving the previous season's top juveniles that remain hurdling off until after the turn of the year, that works well for the festival when their belated seasonal comeback goes to plan, as it did with Lossiemouth. When it goes wrong, as it did here, you've got very little margin for error in turning things around. 7 weeks till the festival, plenty of Willies running now wouldn't run again. I think Cargizi will need to. Quivega at Punchestown, 20 days before the Mares Hurdle's the obvious race. That is over 2 mile 4, chance of deep ground, so which might not help her settle. Willie does often run mares in the Quivega before they go for the Mares Hurdle, but it's not ideal. I'd like to see her go well in that for considering her before Cheltenham. 9.0 doesn't appeal for the Mares Hurdle. I take no chances by contrast, very fit off the 4 runs. despite looking as if she was going to be outclassed at one stage, knuckled down really well, stayed on Dowley, having been under pressure a long way out. She's a good mare, but was comfortably beaten off 137, albeit what's probably a hot handicap last time. So 15.0 makes no appeal for the mare's herd.
Okay, yeah, Don, it was like Whitty had discovered the best thing to do with these 4-year-olds, bring them slowly throughout the season, like Lozzie made last year versus what happened a couple of years ago. Yet, as Matt says, it leaves you with very little margin for error if it doesn't quite go to plan. Not saying it was an entirely bad run, but she will probably need to go to perhaps Punchestown, similar to what Annie Power, etc., have done in the past.
Yeah, no, it was disappointing, all right, Dan. She was an odds-on shot. She was sent off at 2 to 5. She was, as Matt said, she was a bit keen through her race, as you expect, but not as keen as she had been in the past. And she arrived there. She travelled like the most likely winner to the second last flight. And look, you have to take your hat off to take no chances. She was very, very good. She battled well. She was travelling third best of the three who went to the final flight together. Lou Betty was on the near side, and she came into the race on a high as well, having won well the previous time at Kempton over Christmas. Would Take No Chances finished third in the Silver Trophy at Chepstow in her debut this season over 2.5 miles. I said that she'd be interesting now, stepped up and trip, and her 2 wins since have been in 2-mile races. So she's got that pace as well. She's so versatile. So, really gutsy game performance by her to go and win it. But as Matt said, she came into the race hard, race fit, and targeted at the race. It's a big race, a grade 2 race in the bag for her. So brilliant for her. But I wouldn't entirely give up on Cargesi yet. Like, you have to, obviously last season, as we've mentioned on a couple of occasions now on here, last season's juveniles were so good. She won the spring juvenile herd. She finished second in the Triumph behind Madgeborough. She finished second at Aintree behind Sergino, and then she went and won the champion 4-year-old hurdle at Punchestown. So she had a lot of racing in the late part of the season. So I'm sure the plan was to leave her off in the early part of the season, as Matt said, as well he did with Lossie Mount last year. And I suppose for 2/3, 3/4 of the race, everything was going to plan. Just didn't see it out. So she's going to have to improve. Obviously, it goes without saying, significantly on this. The step up to 2.5 miles as well for the mare's hurdle. Is that going to be a positive for her, given her running style and how keen she can be? It's not. On breeding, you can argue the case that she's a half sister to a mare who won over 2 miles in 5. Her dam won over 12 furlongs on the flat. She's from the family of Sandar, the Grand National runner-up. So you can argue that 2.5 miles won't be an issue for her on breeding, as long as she learns to settle better. And on her seasonal debut, and you'd expect that she'd be as fresh as she's going to be throughout the season, and fresher than she is probably. It wasn't too bad. She wasn't a runaway. So if she just, from this experience, settles a wee bit better and comes on from this run, the fact that she's got a really good run at Cheltenham, at the Cheltenham Festival, and the Triumph Hurdle on the board as well, that's a positive for her. So yeah, I wouldn't entirely give up on Cargesi as a mare's hurdle prospect.
Yeah, interesting to see if she goes straight to Cheltenham or gets another run. Moscow Flyer time. We obviously missed this last week as we were covering the chases. Don, might start with you here. Matt's trend essentially saying, give a small sample size and all, but they're 2-0 in the 2.5 versus the Supreme, even though you would think it's more Supreme trial. I don't have any skin in the Salvador Mundi game. I'm not sure if you do or not. If you do, please declare biases before talking about it. But I wasn't overly impressed. I went on Twitter. It was like Twitter had watched a different race. I accept some of the reasons that he'll come on for the run, etc. But this wasn't a Supreme favourite in an average year, was it?
I have no skin in the game either, Dan. Yeah, look, you can look at it both ways. And, he didn't jump well. In mitigation, he has jumped better in the past. The pace was not strong. The finishing speed percent was 112%. He looked beaten when they quickened on the run to the home turn. And actually, I looked beyond him. I was looking at the 3 in front of him to see how it was going to play out. And suddenly he's back on the outside and staying on. So you have to hand it to him. It was a good performance, given where he was on the run to the home turn, to stay on as well as he did in a slowly run race, given that he hadn't jumped well. And look, he's that run behind Sergino at Auteuil, that's always going to be the positive or the negative with which you're going to view Salvatore Mundi. But he was pretty well beaten in the Triumph Hurdle last season when he wasn't unfancy. Like he sent off an 8 or 9 to 1 shot. So he was well beaten there. He was like ridiculously impressive for Tipperary, obviously in May. This is his first run since, so he'll come on for it. And like when a horse does plenty wrong and still wins, you have to. There's definitely a positive in that, and I suppose it's similar to Hello Neighbour, of whom I'm a fan, when he won the Grade 2 juvenile hurdle at Leopardstown over Christmas. He did an awful lot wrong, but I remain a fan of his, because I think if he can just iron those out, now that was his first run over hurdles, then he could come forward quite a lot. And Salvatore Mundi, likewise, I think, you know, in a more truly run race, and this was his first run back after a while, since the middle of May, so there was a possibility of ring rustiness there. In a faster run race, he could jump a wee bit better than he did. He won't be as keen as he was here in a fast run race, and he probably won't be as keen either with this experience and this run under his belt. The race was run in a time that was identical to the time that Kapaji Pike clocked in winning the maiden hurdle a half an hour later, and that was a race run in a finishes big percent of 110%. So the time was not outstanding. So he's going, obviously it goes without saying, he's going to have to improve on this. But look, Calais-Soir he came into the race with a good level of form. He'd won at Cork, relieved of duties, had won well at Cork in December as well, beat Magic McColgan, and she came out and won next time as well. So it probably wasn't a bad Moscow Flyer. There are lots of horses, and Sky Lordy's not a bad horse either, Henry de Bromhead. So the horses who chased him home, they're horses, all three are horses with lots of potential. So it could have been a good performance that he put up in beating him, especially given where he came from and given all that went wrong through the race. So does he deserve to be Supreme Novices Hurdle favourite? I don't think so. I think he's very short in the Supreme Novices Hurdle market, given all of that, and it's probably a lot down to his profile. But I think he can go and win it. Absolutely, yeah. I think he can step forward from this.
Yeah, I think Don sort of hit the nail on the head at the end, Matt. It's all well and good talking about these reasons for performances in context of a double figure shot at this time of year for the Supreme Novices Hurdle. But when we're talking about the 4.33 favourite at the time of recording, then he's got to show you a bit more.
Definitely. He might be the horse that divides opinion most on this year's preview night circuit. Absolutely agree with Don's analysis of the race. So you either take the view he must have a heck of an engine to do that after doing so much wrong, and if that takes the freshness out of him after 242 days off, he's the class to win a Supreme. I looked at the Triumph again, and he was nothing like as keen there. So it's not as if he is just one of those horses like Carghese we were just discussing, who is always keen, and it's just how much you can keep a lid on him. So that could get sorted out. Hopefully he could jump better. So you can craft an argument, although most of the people doing that, I suspect, are people with anti-post dockets and confirmation bias. I'm more in the camp that say he's just not professional enough for the Supreme. And it wasn't a great Moscow Flyer. The Racing Post rating of 138 he got was the lowest since 2008. I mentioned he was sixth in the Triumph last year. No horse has won the Supreme Turners or Albert Bartlett since at least 1990, having run in a hurdle race at the festival previously. Concertista won the Grade 2 Dawn Run, having been second on hurdling debut the previous year. He's actually a third season hurdler. The run with Sergino was at the end of the 22-23 season. I mean, Brave Inca did win the Supreme as a third season hurdler, so it can be done, but it's unusual. So he's got a very different profile to the normal winner of the Supreme. I just don't like backing horses for a Supreme that do lots of things wrong. You look at some of the Mullins horses like the Asterion Phalanges and Getter Birds who run in that. Tully Hill last year, often going off favourite or close to it. When you've seen them running their prep races, there are all sorts of potential holes in them. They don't turn to win. It's the Duvans who look absolutely bomb-proof who do. Brave Inca in a couple of weeks' time will be crucial for the anti-post markets in this. And it'll also be important for sorting out Willie's pecking order. So mentioned that Salvador Mundi, very keen here, but wasn't so much in the Triumph. So looking at this, you'd think Supreme for him. But we've seen horses like Ballyburn and Sir Gerhard end up in the Turners because that suited the overall Closutton team ideally. In years when most punters were convinced they'd run in the Supreme. So do be open-minded, see what happens at DRF. I'll be holding fire for now. And a final point about Cheltenham is that whilst the Moscow Flyer has a good history of producing Supreme and Turners winners, as you said, Daniel, they all won at Punchestown. Horses beaten in the Moscow Flyer, 0 from 26 at the festival so far. So history suggests, for the festival at least, we should just be focusing on the winner.
Okay, that concludes our review. A lot in that. So thanks to Matt and Don. And then we get over to our eye catcher section 3 each. So Don, kick us off with your 3.
So the first is Blaze the Way, who finished second behind Music of Tara in a 2.5 mile handicap hurdle at Navan. I thought he did really well to get as close as he did, in which the whole horses came to the fore. He was prominent from about the 3rd or 4th flight, and he battled on really well. The 7 of the first 8 horses home raced in mid-division or worse from early. He was the only one who raced prominently from early who was able to be in there, and it looked like he was going to go and win the race before Music of Tara came and got him. So it was a big performance by him. He was dropping down in trip here from 3 miles and a furlong the last day to 2.5 miles, and I think stepping back up in trip now, that could see him take a step forward again. He was rated 114 when he won over 3 miles at Navan on his previous run. He was up to 121 here. He's got another £4 now, up to 125. But I think he's an improving horse of Mags Mullins, and I think stepping back up in trip to 3 miles, that could see him take a nice step forward again. So he's interesting and could be a relatively well handicapped horse. He's only had 6 runs over hurdles, so he's still a horse who's got plenty more to give. Samui in the horse and jockey handicap hurdle at Thurles on Sunday. I'm sure he's going to be on many people's radars. Gordon was interviewed by Gary on Racing TV beforehand, and he was very lukewarm about his chances. He said he thought he'd come on for it, and if he does, then he could be really interesting horse now going forward. He's a classy horse on the flat. This is his first run since he ran in the Saravich. He's got a rating of 104 on the flat. He finished 3rd behind Absurd in a listed race at Chester there during the summer. So he's got that class on the flat. He's a Lartigue hurdle winner as well, and he's now his rating of 126 going into this race compared very favourably with his flat rating. He's now 132. He got £6 for this. But as much as that, he stayed on really well. It was another slowly run race, and he didn't look the most likely winner when he came under a ride across the top of the track. And Stuntman Steve fell at the second last fight. He was travelling well at the time, and maybe he would have been a player. But Samui, he stayed on really well. Given that he stays so well in the flat, there's every chance that he will improve for stepping up and trip over hurdles. So over a longer trip, this was the minimum trip. It's 1 mile and 7.5 furlongs on good ground at Thurles. So it's absolutely a test of pace more than stamina. But you think that Samui will improve again for a greater test of stamina. So I think he's worth keeping in mind. And Jipko in the 3 mile handicap hurdle at Windsor on Sunday, he did really well to get as close as he did. He was held up early on. He was stepping up to 3 miles for the first time, and he finished off his race really well. Again, another slowly run race, 113% finishing speed. It was a race in which the pace horses kept up the pace, pushed the button, and Deep Cave. They were both first and second from early. They finished 2nd and 4th. Jipko stayed on towards the near side, and he was a wee bit keen early on through his race. So with this experience under his belt, he's completely unexposed over 3 miles. He won really well over 2.5 miles in his previous run. He's up to a mark of 129 now. So he was looking fairly exposed, but he had a wind operation before his last run. He won at a biggish price at Newbury the last day, and it looks like he's an improved horse now for his wind operation. He's still only 6, so again, he's unexposed over 3 miles. I think a 3 mile hurdle off his handicap rating, he could be very interesting in a staying handicap hurdle.
That's Jipko, Samu, and Blaze the Way for Don. And Matt, your 3 eye catchers.
First one's Cocktail Blur, who was second in the 40 grand bumper at Windsor on Sunday. Aren't many bumpers with that sort of prize fund, so you'd expect it to be a decent contest. Now, I suspect the consensus may be he had a soft lead here, so isn't quite as good as the bare form. I'm taking a bit of a contrarian view. He was only one of 2 in the race, making the rules debut. The other was a well-beaten 5th. So whilst he running points, he's conceding rules experience in a race like this, and I think he could improve plenty for it. Aren't too many clues from his breeding, but what there are suggests he may act on any ground. He ran on good to yielding and soft to heavy in points. Chris Gordon's a trainer who does well with the raw material he gets, and despite his pointing background, Cocktail Blur looks a horse with a good cruising speed here, as if he may be effective at 2 miles. And this was quite strongly run for a bumper. Just looked to get a bit tired at the business end. He should be tough to beat in an ordinary bumper next time. Be no surprise to see him develop into a useful jumper. The second is Funicular. Clonmel's arguably the course where the ground gets deepest anywhere in the British Isles. Even though it's officially soft rather than heavy, it's hard to be impressive in those conditions. I was taken by his performance. Jumped and travelled at ease clear of the 123 rated Adragul when that one took a really tired looking fall at the last. hunches he was weakening, would have been beaten quite a long way. Pair got racing a fair way out. It looked a decent test at 2-1. They were a long way clear. The eventual third was beaten 58 lengths. 17 length runner-up Hitak was went off 101.0, but he was 3 from 5 in points and hunters for Ellen Marie Holden. And on debut for Tara Lee Cogan at Limerick in a hunter, the gun qualified rider Barry O'Neill was booked. He was pulled up, but that must have been a positive. So it's hard to work out the form here. My gut feel is that Funicular might turn into one of the Mullins A-teamers for the festival. Willie was quite complimentary in his Sporting Life column, saying he looks a speedy type. And the pecking order of the Mullins novices is shrouded in mist at the moment. Entries coming out today, so that will help a little bit for the festival. It's easy to get suckered into watching a maiden winner and thinking you've seen a star. I'm definitely in danger of that. But he's 26.0 for the Supreme, 34.0 for the Turners. Wouldn't surprise me if he ended up a leading contender for either. And finally, Secret Squirrel. In terms of literally catching the eye, he's a knockout. So in that sense, he isn't a horse to go under the radar. But I thought he was an impressive winner of that 100 grand 2-mile handicap at Windsor on Friday off 126. They looked to go steadily, finished a bit of a heap, less than 10 lengths separating the first 10 home. And in that context, winning by an easy 2 lengths over the very promising Cabral de Matan looks the sort of strong form the prize money warrants. Did carry his head a bit awkwardly at the business end, makes it harder to tell, but it looked like Nico, who was riding for the first time, is holding on to quite a bit, maybe with his future mark in mind. Thought he won with plenty in hand. He chased too strong a pace at Ascot last time. He's looked progressive. Soft ground here, which he was withdrawn from in the Dovecote, seemingly something he can now cope with. He's in the big handicap at Newbury next month. Looks the obvious place to go. I think Hughie Morrison said that's the plan. He looks a strong contender for that.
Okay, that's Secret Squirrel, Funicula, and Cocktail Bleu for Matt. My thanks to both Matt and Donn. We'll be back same time, same next week on the Matchbook Cheltenham Trail as we build up towards the Dublin Racing Festival, plus a review of hopefully that Lossiemouth and Constitution Hill clash. We don't have time for questions today, but do get your questions either in the YouTube comments, Twitter, or reach out to myself or Matt's account. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.